Which one?
The intelligence on these.
Well, again, there's a range, because you're dealing with a range of different people in a range of different circumstances. Everything is different, but sometimes we share intelligence, which is gathered, because these people may be in connection with groups of people that are under the watch of others. So sometimes we can gather intelligence that way. Other ways we gather it ourselves.
So some of the intelligence was passed from another nation, like for example, Europe.
It's always possible if they are in connection with somebody that was for a variety of risks being surveyed by someone else.
And so those people that had their passports cancelled that were involved with Syria, where are they now? Are they back in New Zealand?
Well, by definition, they didn't leave.
What about the people who left? The people who left and are in Syria?
Yeah.
Obviously didn't have their passports cancelled. Was that because security force, intelligence services here weren't aware that they were going to Syria before they left, or?
Yeah, so there can be a variety of different reasons. They obviously don't put their hand up and say they're necessarily going to be freedom fighters in Syria when they leave. So they present a series of reasons why they might be leaving the country. So it's a fairly big step for us. And in the context of, I think since 2005, there's been under 10 people whose passports have actually been cancelled.
Does the law have to be broken for the passport cancellation decision to be made?
Well, it has to comply with the 2005 legislation, which allows the Minister of Internal Affairs, for national security reasons, to cancel their passport. So they have to comply with, the Minister has to comply with that law. There's certain tests, I don't have those tests in front of me about what you need to breach.
The Terrorism Suppression Act.
It's the 2005 passports legislation, I think, from memory.
So when you, so of those 10 people who've had their passports revoked, how many of those were involved?
I'd say it's less than 10, but
less than 10. How many of those were involved in Syria?
I don't have those exact details.
So do you know how
the majority of?
Just wouldn't want to speculate on that. There's certainly some, but I don't have all the details.
When you're talking about Syria, people going to Syria, come back from Syria, are you talking handful, dozens, more than that?
Well, there's a small group of people that have gone to Syria to fight. There's a small group of people that were going to Syria that we've stopped.
And there are a group over there now that have had their passports cancelled on them while they've been out of the country.
I can't confirm exactly those numbers.
So what's happened to those people trying to go there that you've stopped? They're here.
Well, I'm not going to go through how we handle that, but again, what I can say is it backs up 100% all of the points I was making during the intelligence debate in GCSB last year.
Yeah, I understand that, but I guess if you stop people from going to Syria who are here, have they faced any charges? Are they in custody?
They don't necessarily face charges.
So they could be
what it's fair to say is that various authorities may spend time talking to them and working with them to see what risk they actually pose.
And they're still being monitored?
I can't go into all of that.
Are you aware if they are solely New Zealand born citizens, or if they are they?
Some of them have dual nationality.
Do you know which other nationality?
Some of them are Australian.
In relation to GCSB, the issue came up last week of ageing off. Can you describe the process and how long it takes for some material that was previously relevant to not become relevant?
Look, I can't give you all of the details. It's probably better if you go to my office. All I am aware of is that when raw intelligence is gathered under the law, it by definition does age off over a period of time if it's either no longer relevant or has passed the time in which it would be used.
But you don't know how long that period of time is?
I'd have to go and check exactly. I just don't have that on me.
Prime Minister, just quickly about Ian Brown's letter to you relating to the speeding up of the funding of the rail loop. How open are you to that?
Well, I had a discussion with Len Brown last week, and I made it clear to him, because I received the letter the day before the meeting, that I had spelled out in my speech last year that firstly the government is committed to seeing the CBD rail loop completed, that our preferred timetable is starting in 2020, and that we intend to do a review in 2017 to see if the conditions mean that we should bring that forward, but unless those conditions are met, we were less likely to bring it forward. Now, he's presented some arguments around private sector investment that wants the green light, if you like, and therefore he's coming up with a proposal that would see Auckland fund that earlier, but the government would have to agree to a number of conditions that haven't yet been agreed. What I can say is our officials will work their way through that proposal from Len Brown, but at this point really nothing's changed. We're
Why is
still
that? Is
more
that-
on track for 2020.
Is that just because of the funding and the money becoming available closer to 2020?
Well, you're talking about a project, that involves billions of dollars, both for ratepayers and for taxpayers. So it doesn't make sense to bring that expenditure forward unless actually the conditions warrant that. Otherwise, taxpayers and ratepayers, by definition, are paying a lot of cash prior to the point at which it's needed. No one's arguing that the CBD rail tunnel is not needed; it's needed. So there's always going to be a debate about that. I think the government was actually quite clear under the conditions, with the conditions it's set for an earlier start. Now, he's raised a fair point about private sector investment. We'll just need to test all of that and see whether that really is a genuine issue to consider.
Back to Syria, what do you believe would be the motivation for someone based in New Zealand to go to Syria and fight?
Well, obviously a belief that they want to see the government overthrown, but you'd have to ask them really. I mean, everyone has their own motivations.
Is there somewhere in New Zealand that's fostering that sentiment? A centre or a mosque or?
Well, I just don't want to go into kind of how we identify these people and why.
What
Which
about,
side of
is
that
there any
Russian
intelligence as to how they're funding their trips to Syria, or are there any groups that are?
Well, again, I might be privy to that information, but again, I just don't want to go into those details.
But if all of those fighters that you've identified were fighting against Assad's regime?
Yes,
But that could include Al Qaeda.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah, so does this include Al Qaeda sympathisers?
Well, it involves people who are opposed to the Assad regime, and there are a variety of rebel groups, but I think my understanding is the largest rebel group is associated to Al Qaeda.
Do you know who's arming them? Is it Al Qaeda?
I just don't have enough of those details to.
And some of those people could just be walking around New Zealand now because of the grounds to charge them.
Well, it's not quite as random as that. I mean, we gather information where we believe it's in the national interest to do so. That's why we have intelligence agencies. Sometimes that information is extremely accurate, and it leads us to people who we believe, and upon discussion with them, would have left if we didn't take steps. We have physically stopped some people, and we're clearly aware of others who are in Syria.
Physically stopped at what point? Were they at customs or?
Well, again, I'm just not going to go into those individual details.
Are there any
people with family in
prosecutions or any?
Syria, or just people who are sympathetic toward the cause?
It's a range of motivations and backgrounds from what I can see.
So are
Does it
there
lead
any
you to
prosecutions or matters before this court relating to Syria?
Sorry,
Are there any prosecutions or matters before the court relating to these individuals?
not that I'm aware of.
So no one was charged or?
I think it's handled in a different way.
Does it necessitate a rethink of the government's plan to bring in 100 Syrian refugees?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think the general view has been that Syrians that have come to live in New Zealand have actually been extremely good citizens when they've come here. It's part of a worldwide program. I mean, we're taking 100, but I think the United States is taking 15,000. Australia's taking a big number.
When you say handled in a different way, are you referring to the passport cancellation?
Well, just the whole issue, but just leave it there.
What other ways would there be of dealing with that?
Well, you have to go away and think creatively.
Just
It's only going to the individual cases.
Can you indulge me and maybe
No.
explain?
No.
Just on your beer pong at
I-
the weekend, do you think that's the right message to be sending out to New Zealand when we have this so-called binge drinking culture?
Well, I think you've got to have a bit of context around, this is a sort of fun day, so you throw a ping pong into 2 cups, at which point I said that's enough. It was about an inch in each cup. I'd put a bit of perspective around it.
So you don't think it sends the wrong message to people?
Well, look, in the end, I'll leave other people to assess it, but all I'd say to you is that you need to see it in the context of the overall sort of day. I didn't see people actually who were intoxicated or heavily intoxicated at the event. It was a fun carnival, festival, family event.
What about calling David Cameron an idiot this morning?
Well, I stand by that completely. I mean, look, in the end, if the guy is going to deliberately mislead New Zealanders about the role that the Labour government played in signing New Zealanders up to this deal, and then somehow try and blame me for it, he is an idiot. I mean, he's either being deliberately dishonest or has got terrible amnesia about the role that Helen Clark and Labour played. I don't mind taking responsibility for things that we've signed up to. I'm doing the student loans. We're now working on a number of other issues. But realistically, Labor signed New Zealand up to that deal. If he's ashamed of Labor's history, he should apologise for that. But trying to turn the guns on me and say that somehow it's my responsibility is, well, you know what I think about.
Mike Williams said New Zealand was mugged in the deal that Helen Clark signed. Is that fair?
Well, again, you know, maybe Mike, who he spent his entire time as Labor Party president, supporting Helen Clark, fundraising for that government, should rethink whether his association was the right one.
Those Kiwis that escaped prosecution for supposedly going to Syria, were they, did they escape prosecution?
Well, they haven't necessarily broken the law.
Okay, so when you mean they were dealt with in other ways, did they perhaps exchange information with authorities?
Well, all I'm saying to you is that if the government becomes aware of somebody that is going to a war zone that may be fighting with rebel fighters, the fact that they are having those thoughts doesn't mean by definition they have broken the law. What it does mean is that we, for the safety and security of New Zealanders and what might occur if they go into that environment and then return, that's of interest to us and we deal with that appropriately.
They
So
haven't
you
broken
cancel
the
the
law though because
passport.
there is no law. Do
No.
we need a law that
Well, it would be a very difficult law to write. I mean, you're
Australia
writing,
hasn't got one?
well, not necessarily, not in the way that you're saying. At that particular point, they haven't broken the law.
So just to be
The
clear, you
Australians-
cancelled the passports because they had some thoughts?
Well, obviously we don't go randomly cancelling